In these problems, we want to determine the domain of the composite function f of g. So what we know from the textbook is that we have to exclude certain values from the domain of f of g, and what's left is the domain of f of g. So the first thing we're going to do is look at the function g by itself. Any value that is not in the domain of g can't be in the domain of f of g. So let's take a look at number 53. And what do we have to exclude from g of x, from the domain? We have to exclude negative 10 because that would make the denominator 0. So the domain of g is, let's see, negative infinity to negative 10, and then we union that with negative 10 to infinity because we're only cutting out that one value. Now we're going to check to see is there any value of x that doesn't work in f of g. So let's find f of g. F of g would be, we're going to take the function g and substitute it into f. So we have 4 over x plus 10 plus 5. So that's f of g. Now the domain of this function is the same as the domain of g. That happens quite often. So its domain is the same as the domain of g. And that's negative infinity to negative 10 union negative 10 to infinity. And in the answer key they have an or there instead of union. It really should be a union sign. I don't know why they used an or there. Now let's take a look at 54. Again, we're first going to determine the domain of g. And by domain of g, I mean the function that's being substituted into the other function. So if they had said the composite function g of f, then we'd be looking at the domain of f and then the domain of g of f. But here it's domain of g. So the domain of g, let's see, we have g of x equals the square root of x. So the only values that we can put under the square root are the values from 0 to infinity. So we can take the square root of 0, we can take the square root of anything positive, but we can't take the square root of a negative. Now if I substitute and find f of g, then we're substituting the function g of x in for the x in f of x. So we get 3 times the square root of x plus a 12. Now this doesn't change anything because the only values we have to exclude are values that we can't use in the radical. So again, the domain is from 0 to positive infinity. And those are our answers for those two problems.